Anyway, so I thought just a final thing, we'd talk about feminism, because we don't talk about feminism actually anymore.
That went well.
Yeah. And this is just kind of a, well, what did you think was going to happen segment. Feminism has left middle-aged women like me single, childless, and depressed. We were taught to prioritize our careers over marriage, and now we're paying for it. Who taught you that? Oh, feminists. Said, become a feminist, don't get married, don't have kids, be a wage slave your entire life, and in your 50s, you're like, hang on a second, that's not good. I don't like it. So I'm just going to read out a few things from this, because it's just remarkable. She says, I increasingly feel that feminism has failed my generation.
It has.
No, it hasn't. It did exactly what it meant to do.
Well, it's failed.
Yeah, you don't say.
Failed to give them well-being, but obviously it was going to fail.
But it never promised them well-being. It promised them freedom. It promised them that they would have it all. Like, it didn't say you're going to be happy. It said you're not going to be enthralled to a man. It's like, okay, yeah, you're not. You're totally free. No man wants you because you're in your 50s and you're a girl boss. It's like, okay, well, then what now? You know, this hasn't failed you. This is the purpose of feminism, and they were never shy about saying it. She says she went to a private school, obviously, and she says, we were children of Thatcher and similarly educated out of marriage and distaff pursuits.
Thatcher was famously not a feminist.
I know. But she was, I guess, a girl boss.
Oh, that's for sure.
So, yeah. I recall an occasion when Shirley Conrad attempted to upbraid us with the words, Paulinas do not cook, they think. This is all very well when you are young and aspire to greatness. Shakespeare said, when beggars die, there are no comet seen. The heavens themselves blaze forth the death of princes. It's like, okay, so your education system set about defeminizing you.
Yes.
And turning you into a kind of simulacrum of a man.
Yes.
Okay, why would you think this is it letting itself or letting you down when this is what it promised in the first place? This was always the goal.
Well, they might also be realizing as well that being a man's not all that, right? It's not what not what feminism told them it was.
No, it's
actually, going out and working a job and earning a wage isn't necessarily the most aspirational thing in the world, and perhaps starting a family is actually more fulfilling.
Well, men only really did go out to work to support their families.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
We know as well, because men are just underachieving massively now. But she says, historically, of course, the feminist argument had valid points. Oh, did it? Right? In the old days, when members of my sex were bound first to their fathers and then to their husbands, they undoubtedly led disagreeable lives. So did they? So if we chart women's happiness over time, how's it looking? Oh, it's gone down since you're not bound to your husbands and your fathers. Mm-hmm. So why would you say their lives are disagreeable? Especially, it was only ever a very small minority of women who were feminists in the first place. So was it actually that disagreeable? Why were women happier then than they are now? Why are you writing this article if women were happier then? Your grandmother wasn't writing that. If a woman had a good education, however, she could make a comfortable living and remain independent of male approval. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what was the problem? When the desire for marriage and children overwhelmed her, she would almost certainly lose her job and in consequence become tied to her house and compelled to perform 1,000 trivial and demeaning tasks unworthy of her ability.
I have to perform those tasks all the time.
Exactly. God, how many nappies do you think I've changed in my life? I've got 4 kids, man.
I even have to use a Hoover on my floor.
You know what?
It's a disgrace. I'm a slave to that damn Hoover.
On Saturday mornings, I let my wife have a lie-in because she's been stressed all week from the kids, and I get up and with the kids, we tidy the house up. So it's nice and clean when she gets up, and so her day can be a bit better. It's like, oh my God, that's unworthy of my ability.
Very wholesome.
I think it's kind of ridiculous that it's always framed as if men in the past just expected everything to be done by the woman, even though, even talking to my grandparents who grew up during World War II and things like that, it was a tit for tat sort of thing. They sort of figured it out between them.
Everyone does.
In the working class communities, a lot of my family were miners in South Wales, and the women worked extremely hard, having to, as everyone worked. Yeah. Everywhere. There wasn't a choice. Nobody was off having the life of Riley. No. The men were down the pit, and the women were at home, whitewashing the doorstep or whatever. Yeah. Black in the doorstep, or just trying to, keep the bloody house warm and clean amongst the coal soot.
My mum's mum was a housewife. Obviously, my mum's granddad, her side. They were from the Rhondda Valleys.
Yeah.
And so she would tell me, like, I'd get up at like 6 a.m. and she'd tell me stories of what it was like in the old days.
Yeah.
And she'd just tell me how, like, the coal miners all come back at the end of the day and they're all just black as night. And so you'd only know which one was yours when he came down the path to the house. And I started asking, okay, like when I started learning about feminism, I went back and asked her, I said, okay, what happened with like money and stuff? And she was like, oh, well, on Friday he'd get paid a little paper envelope with the money in, and then he'd just hand it to me. I'd divvy out everything for the house bills, and then I'd give him like 2 pence or something.
You'd go down the pub.
So he could go to the pub that evening.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, she was in control of everything. She managed the household. Like the idea that this is just like him patriarchally, no, she gives him his pocket money out for money.
It's the lie that feminism peddled, that this was oppressive rather than just an agreement between two parties.
It was only ever middle-class women who could stay at home.
Exactly.
And a lot of those women also did part-time jobs.
Yep.
Back in my grandmother ironed for royalty.
Yeah.
She did. She was a washerwoman, and the mangle and the iron.
Yep. Well, it's sort of insulting to women of the past as well to suggest that they weren't doing anything important. They were just kept at home.
Completely.
Yeah, it would
completely demeaning.
We're not in the Middle East where they can't even be in the same room as men.
And that also women controlled basically every social function as well. Like you had lots of clubs that people would go to, and women organized all of these things. But it doesn't matter because feminists didn't see that. They didn't value that at all. But anyway, she says, she goes through a bit more and says, well, look, feminism seems to have changed and the West seems to have changed, and maybe we've outgrown feminism entirely. Where does that leave women like me? When I have reached the age of 54, as I have, and her and her friends find themselves single and childless, well, that was the point. You wanted out of the contract between the man and the woman, and you gave up all of those things as a proud feminist. That's just what happens to feminists. She says, 1 in 10 British women in their 50s have never married and live alone, which is neither pleasant nor healthy. So turn on the people who betrayed you then. Who told you this was a good idea? Find those people and be like, you ruined my life. Instead of like, well, I mean, guys, I think maybe feminism was failure. No, you literally, I don't know.
They embraced it.
Yeah, exactly.
They embraced it. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there was no mystery to what the outcome would be.
And it was, and Gloria Steinem had been saying, like Angela Dworkin, Andrea Dworkin, that's it. Like they said the most absurd things at the time. These are the icons of feminism. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, literally, Dworkin's like, all sex with a man is rape, and it's like, okay, mad.
Bit rich coming from but I always find that when I hear them bring up childless, because there have been a few cases where sort of feminists have said we were sold a false bill of goods, I can't help but feel a little bit sorry for them, even after everything. When they bring up the childless thing, I'm just like, yeah,
that is sad.
I know how crushing that can be to an older woman to feel like they don't have children, because it's so programmed into them instinctually that it must feel like there's something seriously wrong.
And becoming the matriarch as a grandmother is incredibly rewarding. My mum wasn't particularly family oriented, to say the least. However, she's now surrounded by a large family who really care for her and that she loves, and in a way she's got the reward, even though she kind of played the feminist game herself. And she's kind of just by chance, in a way, she's ended up in the kind of matriarchal position.
But that's
and it's I think it's very positive. I'm very happy for her. It's very positive.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Because she, as women grow older, of course, they get less male attention, and so they move into different roles in their lives. You might begin as like, a very desirable, attractive young woman, then you move into the sort of mother role, and then you move into, like, say, the matriarch role.
Yeah.
And these women have been denied that. And so there's a kind of spiritual void here.
I think that there's a certain vacuum that needs to be filled here of just positing what's positive about growing older as a woman, right? It's, having a family and then eventually going on to be a grandmother, because I know that my grandparents are immensely proud of their family. It was the animating principle of their life.
Yep.
And to take that away from someone is to destroy them utterly.
Yeah, I mean, she says that exactly, right? According to a recent study by the American Medical Institute, loneliness is the leading cause of depression amongst middle-aged females. Really, it's not being oppressed by your husband then. It's not that. Right.
Your
okay.
boss.
Or your boss. Yeah, or your boss. But it's just loneliness. I should know, as I've recently fell prey to the unforgiving maw of mental illness. This has taken me to hospital several times after I experienced impulses so dark that friends became concerned. On one occasion, I recall a nurse in A&E asking me about my plans to end my life and replying like Keir Starmer's view on women, they were uninformed. Okay, so let's return to those valid points that the feminists made then. So actually being a part of a family, being like the daughter of your father or the wife of your husband is actually what would stop you from feeling depressed. So were the feminist points originally legitimate? No. You've already debunked them in your own article. Like, none of this was legitimate. Like, what could have been good for women about this? She says, the truth is that much of my depression sprung from a solitary existence that would be eschewed by a race of alley cats. I do not know one single woman of my generation who lives such a life and actually likes it. Right. So there's, again, like 10% of women in their 50s are just like, I haven't got any kids. Feminism's completely failed me.
Well, feminism seems to work well for middle-class women in their 20s.
Yes, it does. Very well, actually.
Yeah,
Doesn't work so much outside of that, does it?
No, it seems to be very much a kind of specific, aimed at a specific age range, a pastime of a very specific age range.
Yeah.
There's actually a phenomenon I've kind of noticed, and it's sort of a pet theory of mine, and it's something I've noticed particularly in London, so you might be able to help me out here. I've noticed when I've gone to sort of social occasions in London that there are lots of women in their 30s and 40s that are still behaving as if they're in their 20s.
Yeah.
And I think that the opportunities available in a very large city, the very population dense and provides a certain amount of anonymity, it gives people the impression that they can remain young forever in a sense, and it leads them down a road of being misguided. Whereas if you live in a sort of smaller community, there's sort of a clearer pathway to get settled, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true across the board with people in general being kind of eternally, certainly Generation Xers like myself. I think we behave as a generation like eternal teenagers. And I think it's a phenomenon across the board, not just among single women.
Of course.
But I think, it's the kind of ab-fab trope with the child trying to be sensible and the parent going off the rails. I see it often. I think you're right. It's a phenomena. It's a phenomena of our time that's being facilitated by technology and ease of living. And, I think there are various social reasons for it. But it stops as times get harder. So young people are having, we talk about the 18-year-olds being conscripted. It's not much fun being a teenager, I don't think, in the way that perhaps we had fun. Oh, yeah. We might want to extend our teenage years into our elderly years. However, I wonder how many teenagers would want to do that with their experience of being young now.
You know what's interesting is this next bit that she comes on to. She says, recently, after my depression became debilitating, I had a female student living in my home. She was 24 and had blue-black hair and skin that seemed lit with the sun's afterglow. After a week of apprenticeship, it dawned on me that the notion of not marrying and giving birth before 30 was anathema to her. And like Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, she wished to dash this cup from her lips. In short, she wanted to conduct her life like a woman. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
24-year-olds just like, well, yeah, I'm going to get married and have kids. What did you do? Oh, I was a feminist.
Yeah.
And how is that working out for you?
Well,
miserable.
I mean, are there not movements now where it's being suggested to younger women to have kids young and then go to college and have your career after they've grown up? I thought that was becoming a thing. Yeah. I don't know if I'm right about that, but I seem to be more aware that this is advice that is being given to younger women. Actually, it's quite good to have kids when you're young and you've got energy. Oh, yeah. And then you can always have a career afterwards. I mean, people do, live a longer time these days. Well, depending. Yes. So I would say that should be encouraged as advice.
I totally agree. But I love this. She wanted to conduct her life like a woman. It's like, okay, what were you doing with your life if not conducting it like a woman? What did feminism do to you? It turned you into a man.
But feminism always kind of saw women as faulty men. Yeah.
You're not out competing the men. You're a failure. It's like, what are you talking about?
See, most men don't outcompete other men.
Exactly,
It's like competition is good at a certain level, but also cooperation. I mean, cooperation between men is quite a high priority as well.
They never compare them to Colin down the pub. They compare them to CEO in his jet flying.
I think because competition is instinctual for us, we didn't sort of learn its benefits, and therefore we know when it has its limitations. Like you're competitive up until the point where it stops being fun or beneficial.
Yeah,
it's
not a sort of animating principle of your life.
And the men who do become CEOs and world leaders, etc., have an element of kind of psychopathy in a sense, because you have to dedicate so much time and effort. It's your entire life. And the women who now do it, the women who run the world, have done the same thing. So of course I haven't got time for children.
Yeah.
Well, people working, 80 hours a week to run a business.
Yeah.
They've not really prioritized their life in a way that's healthy for them.
I think that this insistence that kind of success is desirable by everybody that has been a fallacy that's gone on for years.
Oh, completely. And she finishes up the article by saying, feminism made the error of telling us to behave and think like men. That wasn't an error.
It wasn't an error at all. It's fully baked in from the beginning. 100%.
That was exactly what they were selling to you. You could live like a man.
Yeah. Well, when they're talking about equality, they're equal to what, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, gender as a social construct goes all the way back to the 19th century, kind of early feminism.
And she says, well, this error was a grave one. Women like myself are paying for it, like gamblers in the casino that has been fixed. We are not men, and in living the single life with its casual encounters, we play for much higher stakes and have more to lose. I wish I had not been taught to throw the dice so high. Isn't that interesting?
It's a little bit sad, actually.
It is sad, but I wish we would stop framing it as this is an accident. This is the failure of feminism. No, this was the point of feminism.
Yeah.
This is what it was trying to do all along.
Yes. We disrupt the nuclear family.
Yep, 100%. From what I would say are, damaged individuals who promoted this, psychologically, you wouldn't look at the early feminists and go, oh, they're healthy. They had a good relationship with their dads.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to be sort of deciphered by how they communicated themselves, right? And the sort of resentment you could see when they're talking about it. You don't proposition building something new and something promising for other people with hatred behind you, do you? It's a weird way of looking at the world. You can be angry about ways you've been wronged. That's sort of separate. But the way they approached it was clearly just resentment towards men, their failure to live up to the expectations that were held for men anyway.
And so this lady's the victim of that. Because it got pumped into her head in school.
I was going to say it was in school. This was very much. I was one of the last years in school in my early teens that had home economics, and the boys and the girls did home. I liked home economics. I liked making rock cakes.
Yeah, well, I remember being about 6 years old and baking mint cookies.
Yeah,
they were nice. I like cookies.
But also in home economics, there was an economic aspect to it. For the girls as they went on, how to run a household budget.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm aware, that was the only financial education there was in schools, and that's kind of completely disappeared.
I didn't have any.
I mean, how to get a bank account, how to not get into debt, or what interest rates are,
sensible things like that.
Yeah, how to pay rent, what it means to pay a bill. All that stuff. Just I think would be very useful. I have no idea. I've not been in school for a long time, so I don't know if they teach that in school.
No, they don't. My kids don't do.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can go on down to our website where you can see things like My Harry and Proper Horror Show's discussion about Stanley Kubrick's work, and if you want to see what we're doing more generally, everything gets posted on our Twitter account. Thank you very much for watching.